In late August, a total solar eclipse will be visible for those living along a narrow strip of land. Stretching across the United States from Oregon to South Carolina, an estimated 12 million people live along the strip. However, another 7 million people are expected to take a trip dropping in on the eclipse. The celestial alignment is a rare treat. For the contiguous 48 states, a total solar eclipse has not occurred in almost 4 decades. The last one took place on February 26, 1979.
I think it really helps us.
The Centers for Disease Control's official website has a page that reads, "You may laugh now, but when it happens, you'll be happy you read this. And hey, maybe you'll even learn a thing or two about how to prepare for a real emergency." The government organization burdened with protecting the public from terrifying and deadly strains of germs and diseases has a plan for the most terrifying apocalypse situation of all, the zombie apocalypse. On a blog from the CDC, a thorough plan has been laid out in order to prepare for such an outbreak.
To say that the Iranian city of Awaz got hot on Thursday, June 29th, would be a massive understatement. It got hotter than hot. According to meteorologists, the temperature in the southwestern city soared to around 129 degrees Fahrenheit or 54 degrees Celsius. Etienne Capiquian, a meteorologist with the French National Weather Service Météo France, said the temperature hit 128.7, while Weather Underground reports the mercury rose to 129.2 degrees. If that's accurate, then Thursday's reading would match the record for the hottest temperatures on Earth. Temperatures of 129.2 have only been recorded twice before. The city of Awaz is home to more than 1 million people. Unfortunately for them, the heat wave is expected to continue. The weather forecast shows highs will continue to stay above 120 degrees next week. For United News International, I'm Neela Uni.
According to a first-of-its-kind detailed projection of potential climate change effects at the local level, poor and southern U.S. counties will get hit hardest by global warming. The study was published Thursday in the Journal of Science. It calculates probable economic harms and benefits for more than 3,100 counties in the United States under different possible scenarios for worldwide emissions of heat-trapping gases. It averages local income by the end of the century, looking at agriculture, energy costs, labor costs, coastal damage from rising seas, crime and deaths, then estimates the effect. Researchers computed the possible effects of 15 types of impacts for each county across 29,000 simulations.
Reuters has reported that Germany's parliament backed the legalization of same-sex marriage on Friday, in a historic vote hailed by gay activists and leftist parties, but criticized by some in Chancellor Angela Merkel's ruling conservative bloc and by the Catholic Church. The move brings Germany into line with many other European nations, including France, Britain, and Spain, and follows Merkel's surprise decision this week to allow her lawmakers to follow their own conscience rather than the party line on the issue. Merkel, daughter of a Protestant pastor, voted against the bill. Hundreds of gay activists, some with painted faces, celebrated outside the Bundestag lower house of parliament after the vote, waving rainbow flags.
Prosecutors on Friday said that a released suicide note showed the former U.S. Marine who killed 3 police officers and wounded 3 others in Baton Rouge, Louisiana last July went to the city to kill police. The note's contents were among new information offered by local district attorney Hilar Moore III. It provided the most extensive details to date of the shooting rampage. The incident was the second in the city with racially charged overtones in the month of July in 2016. It happened amidst angry protests decrying the police shooting of a black man outside of a convenience store.
A man pulled a rifle from under his white lab coat and opened fire inside a Bronx hospital Friday, killing at least 1 person and wounding others before apparently taking his own life. The gunfire broke out Friday afternoon inside the Bronx Lebanon Hospital, bringing police cars and fire trucks rushing to the scene and sending officers onto the roof with their guns drawn as people inside the building were told to hide. Police were still trying to identify how many people had been shot. Emergency crews had been kept from going inside the hospital while the shooter was at large.
The administration had formally notified.
On Thursday, a U.S. State Department spokeswoman announced a planned sale of arms to Taiwan amounting to $1.42 billion, which has left China outraged because the sale contradicts a consensus that was reached in April between President Xi Jinping and Donald Trump. In response, China has urged the U.S. to immediately revoke the planned sale, calling it a wrong decision. In a statement from the Chinese embassy in Washington, officials said the sales would send a very wrong message to Taiwan independence forces.
Conservationists threatened to sue on Friday in order to block a plan by U.S. wildlife managers that strips grizzly bears of federal protection, opening them to hunting around Yellowstone National Park. 3 coalitions, the Humane Society, Wild Earth Guardians, and another that includes the Sierra Club and the Northern Cheyenne Tribe, each formally notified Republican President Donald Trump's administration that they intend to file lawsuits to prevent the delisting of the bears as endangered species. The number of grizzlies in the greater Yellowstone region has climbed to roughly 700 from 136 in 1975, when the bears in the lower 48 states were formally listed as threatened after being hunted, trapped, and poisoned to near extinction. The current total exceeds the government's minimum recovery goal of 500 animals in the region. Despite those gains, the grizzly is found in only about 2% of its original range in the lower 48 states.
Officials hope to reopen a portion of a major roadway and allow more residents to head home on Friday in central Arizona, where firefighters have gained significant ground against a fierce 6-day-old wildfire that forced thousands to evacuate. The blaze, dubbed the Goodwin Fire, has charred nearly 25,000 acres and destroyed an unknown number of homes after erupting on Saturday in the Prescott National Forest, 70 miles north of Phoenix. As of late Thursday, about 2,000 people remain displaced in neighboring communities, and about 1,400 children at summer camps in the area were also sent home, according to sheriff officials.
Last year, construction workers discovered an 1,800-year-old Roman Empire site near the Colosseum as they were digging a shaft to the tunnel of Rome's new Metro Line C. The discovery is part of a home that was burned in a fire. This discovery is particularly interesting because the fire that destroyed the house left some things intact, including wooden beams that, under normal circumstances, would have decayed years ago if they had not been buried.
Researchers at the University of Florida are developing a climate change-ready Brangus cow. By crossing Angus and Brahman breeds, scientists aim to create, quote, the cow of the future, a more heat-tolerant animal that can better adapt to global warming. According to researchers at UF Institute of Food and Agricultural Sciences, more than half of the world's cattle population, including about 40% of cows in the U.S., live in hot, humid environments.
While speaking alongside South Korean President Moon Jae-in on Friday, Trump said that the United States' patience with the North Korean regime is over. In a statement from the Rose Garden at the White House, Trump said the era of strategic patience with the North Korean regime has failed, and frankly, that patience is over. He then went on to say that the U.S. is facing the threat of a reckless and brutal regime in North Korea that has no regard for the safety and security of its people or neighbors. The remarks come from reports that Trump is growing increasingly frustrated with the lack of progress in halting North Korea's nuclear and ballistic missile programs.
The United States has imposed new sanctions on a Chinese bank believed to be laundering money for North Korea. The U.S. also imposed sanctions on a Chinese shipping company and 2 individuals allegedly involved in business with the North. U.S. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin announced the new sanctions on June 29th. He said the Bank of Dandong has facilitated, quote, millions of dollars of transactions for companies involved in North Korea's nuclear and ballistic missile programs. He also said, quote, we are in no way targeting China with these actions. U.S. President Donald Trump has been seeking China's cooperation in putting pressure on North Korea to abandon its nuclear and ballistic missile programs. However, Reuters reports a Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman said, quote, we urge the United States to correct its relevant wrong moves to avoid affecting bilateral cooperation on the relevant issue. For United News International, I'm Matt Paul.
CNN reports that Venezuelan Attorney General Luis Ortega announced charges Thursday against the former head of the country's National Guard, accusing him of systematic human rights violations during sometimes deadly anti-government protests. The announcement came amid fresh clashes between police and protesters on the rain-soaked streets of Caracas. A day earlier, Venezuela's Supreme Court banned Ortega from leaving the country and ordered her assets frozen ahead of a pre-trial hearing scheduled for Tuesday.
This is where the Jungle refugee camp was located until French authorities tore it down last year. They hoped it would stop people coming to Calais, but it hasn't. Hundreds of refugees, mainly from Eritrea, Ethiopia and Afghanistan, are back. They're forced to sleep in the open and to rely on handouts for food and water. On a visit from Paris to assess the situation, French Green Senator Esther Benbassa says the conditions are appalling.
It's a lack of humanity about these persons who are not only in suffering but also in a very bad health situation.
Most people here dream of reaching Britain. Some have family there. Only a few actually make it, but it's enough to keep hope alive. The refugees have endured perilous journeys and fled violence. Now they face hostility from town authorities who don't want them around and from the police. This Ethiopian refugee who didn't want to be identified says he's regularly harassed.
And the police are no good for us because police arrest us and spraying on eyes, beating, and else we have no chance to live here.
Since the jungle was closed last year, there is no doubt that the situation has become a lot more tense for refugees. Fences like this are being put up all the time in a bid to dissuade more people from coming. Activists handing out food and clothing are also keeping a low profile. Some say the town council and police are making their work more difficult.
And what's changed too is the fact that us as, associations helping, we are also getting harassed. We brief all the volunteers, the ones who are serving food, clothes and things like that, on how to deal with the police, because the police can be harassing them very easily. So we have to be very careful.
Calais police unions deny the harassment allegations. They say they need more officers to deal with the situation. The government's promised to come up with a new plan for refugees in France in the next 2 weeks. It's unclear how that will affect the people who are already here. Natasha Butler, Al Jazeera, Calais.
The EU migration crisis takes another turn for the worse. Italy has been inundated with 12,000 asylum seekers in little over 48 hours. The southern EU member state is now threatening dramatic action in a bid to get Brussels to force the hand of other EU member states to do their bit by saying that it will simply stop all non-Italian ships from docking at their ports unless the situation improves. Now, this would exclude boats operated by the EU border agency Frontex and those belonging to the EU's naval operation Sophia. Italy's ambassador to the EU, Maurizio Massari, has told the EU Migration Commissioner Avramopoulos that his country has reached their capacity. Italy hosts some 200,000 refugees. And an EU scheme to redistribute asylum seekers from Greece and Italy never really took off, with central EU countries such as Poland, Hungary and the Czech Republic refusing to take part. But Italy's latest move could have a massive humanitarian impact. It would also contradict the International Convention for the Safety of Life at Sea, which says that people in distress must be rescued and put on shore as soon as it is reasonably practicable. Now, years on the front line, Italy is in a catch-22 situation, unable to turn people away, but unable to cope. Mariam Zadi, CGTN, Brussels.
This has become a regular scene, according to the displaced people here at Zamzam camp. They're complaining about the protection they receive from the peacekeepers.
The mission doesn't patrol as often as it used to. The camp is safe inside, but we can't go out on the farms. A few days ago, armed people outside stopped some of us from farming, and there was fighting in the end. We're all farmers here, but we don't get the protection outside, so we can't go farming.
Many of the displaced people in this camp have been here for more than a decade. The Darfur region in the west of Sudan has suffered conflict since 2003, when fighting began between armed groups and the government. The opposition accused the government of ethnic discrimination. Since then, the fighting has displaced more than 3 million people, 2.7 of them within the Darfur region itself. The region has also been marred with intercommunal violence. The United Nations African Union mission in Darfur was created in 2007 to protect civilians and provide security for delivery of aid for those in need. But it has faced criticism.
The mission has been accused in the past of not fulfilling its mandate by not protecting civilians and reporting atrocities. Some displaced people here say they're not given protection once they leave the camp, leaving them vulnerable to beatings, rape, and even death.
The mission is now facing a 44% cut. Some say it's coming too early, but the head of mission here in Darfur says the conflict has reduced from what it was, and it's time the focus is shifted.
It is time to move to another level, beyond the conflict that we are accustomed to in Darfur, which is a level of, let's now begin to say we can anticipate that there will be peace in Darfur, by which the international community must now come in and then focus on development and many other issues.
Development that is desperately needed by those who have been displaced and don't know if and when they can return home. Hiba Morgan, Al Jazeera, North Darfur.
A year and a half ago, Joshua Holt, a former missionary, met Thamra Candelo, a Venezuelan national, with 2 young daughters, and the 2 Mormons quickly fell in love. Holt traveled to Venezuela to propose, and 5 days later, on June 16, 2016, they were married. And precisely 2 weeks after that, Venezuelan officers burst into their Caracas apartment and arrested the newlyweds while they were awaiting U.S. visas, and they have been in jail ever since. This past June 16th was to be Joshua and Thamara Holt's first wedding anniversary, and Friday marks a full year since their imprisonment, accused of planning to undermine the government. For a full year, Joshua Holt's mother, Lori Moon Holt, has worked tirelessly to secure the couple's freedom, with the assistance of Senator Orrin Hatch, having written letters to both Barack Obama and now to President Donald Trump. Holt alleges the Venezuelan government is treating her son brutally, writing Josh and Thammy will have spent 1 full year in this unjust prison, not even a rehearing, for simply falling in love. According to Senator Hatch, Friday's anniversary is an important time to remind Josh and his family that we are still anxiously engaged in the fight for his freedom.
According to a report by Science magazine, the facility that handles the core of America's nuclear weapons has been effectively closed since 2013 over its inability to control worker safety risks. In mid-2013, 4 federal nuclear safety experts sounded an alarm, informing Nell Miller, acting head of the National Nuclear Security Administration, that Los Alamos didn't have enough personnel who knew how to handle plutonium to keep an uncontrolled chain reaction from going critical. And while that shutdown was not expected to last long, Los Alamos' managers have continued to struggle to meet basic safety standards, a fact which has consistently kept the laboratory from working at full operational capacity. And in February of this year, a separate safety board report detailed the full scope of the shortfall, reporting that while Los Alamos' dangerous work demands 27 fully qualified criticality safety engineers, the lab currently has only 10 on staff.
At 8 p.m. Thursday evening, a slightly revised version of President Donald Trump's travel ban went into effect. The latest version has been stripped of several of the provisions that brought about massive backlash and chaos in airports all over the U.S. in January. Despite the changes, the ban itself is still controversial and likely to generate a new round of court fights. The ban includes a tightening of hardline visa policies already in place that will impact citizens from 6 Muslim-majority countries. Refugees are covered too. The White House and other administration officials have ensured that this time the implementation would be orderly. Officials at Customs and Border Protection have said travelers should expect business as usual at our ports of entry, with all valid visa holders still being able to travel.